Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? My name is Denonu, the man with the biggest and the most blackest privilege on YouTube. And this commentary is going to be about Infinity War. As I'm sure you guys are seeing all over the internet since it dropped last Thursday evening. But since I'm a huge comic book fan, you know, I'm a huge Avengers fan. I know all the characters, all of that good stuff. Let me just get this right out the gate. This commentary is going to be like a big black porn star. It's going to be dark, it's going to be long, and truly expansive. And it's going to be in-depth. And I didn't know how I was going to do this, to be honest, because I will get on this mic and make like a 3-hour commentary talking about the movie, right? But since I know that's not the good thing to do on YouTube, to just throw everything all in one video, I figured I'd break it up. You know, I don't know how many parts this is gonna be, but I'm gonna try to make, I guess, like a mini series of videos talking about all of my thoughts about this movie, because I can't just, I mean, I could throw it all in one video, but I know it's not really the right thing to do. And plus, I mean, you know, like I said, we got, you know, we're gonna get in depth, we're gonna get balls deep, as it were, with the with some of these topics. And starting out this video, since I know people don't like hearing spoilers and everything like that, and since this was a damn near perfect movie, I definitely don't want to spoil things. So this video here, this introduction video, is just gonna be just my impressions, my experience in going to the movies to see it. Spoiler free, of course. I'm just gonna give general thoughts from what I'm hearing from other people and what my interpretation of it was and things like that, because this definitely is an event. You know, like, this isn't like, oh, like I'm gonna go to the movies to see this movie. Like, this is a movie that's, you know, pushing 10 years in the making. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where it's kind of like Black Panther. Black Panther was kind of like a movement, you know, on its own. This is kind of like the same thing, but in a different vein of that. Like, this is a moviegoer's entertainment event, you know, kind of sort of thing. Kind of like if the movies had like a Super Bowl and it was comic book themed. You know, that's what this would be. And going into it, I knew I was going to see it. I mean, like I said, I watch all of the comic book movies, even the movies I don't like. Justice League. But I still watch them because I'm a fan. I grew up reading comic books. The original Infinity War story, I still have the comic books for it, you know, from back in the day, because that's when I started getting into comic books, was reading all of that stuff back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so when this movie was coming out, I already know the storylines that they're pulling from. It's like a mix between 3 different comic book storylines that they're kind of mashing together and making their own amalgam of a movie-going experience based on, you know, all of their movies and everything. And so when I got my tickets, right, it wasn't just me going. I went with my brother, his girl, and his 3 daughters. And I was just gonna get regular tickets, and I thought about it. I was like, hold on, I got good credit, you know. I was like, fuck it, why not make it a thing, right? So I spent like $120 for IMAX 3D for like 7 or 8 people, right? And we all went to the theaters. We had, you know, early, mind you. we went like 20 minutes early, made sure we got seats, food, and everything, because we wasn't getting up once we were sitting down, right? And I will say, given all of my comic book knowledge, even with, you know, across all of the characters, all of the mediums, things like that, right? Normally when I go into a comic book movie, 9 times out of 10, I already know what they're doing, because I read the comic books. I know the storylines that they're pulling from. Like with Justice League, I knew exactly what they were doing. Didn't know kind of what they were doing with Steppenwolf, but I knew who his character was. I know who he worked for. I know how they fucked up Batman v Superman, because they were trying to mash 2 different stories together with the death of Superman and all of that stuff. So movies aren't a surprise to me, right? But when I sat down for Infinity War, I kind of knew what they were going, but by them just mashing ideas together and kind of going in their own direction with it, even I don't know how the movie's gonna play out. Like, I know certain things and certain scenes. I know who characters are. I know what Thanos means when he does certain things, but I don't know the end game of this movieverse. I mean, even I don't know that. So it's one of those things where I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw. And usually for a comic book movie, normally that doesn't happen. I normally, I like what I see, kind of like with the first Avengers movie. I loved it. I already knew what they were. I knew what they were going for, right? But I loved it. Did I think it was perfect? No. No. By all means, it had a little bit of story issues. Things weren't explained a little bit. Things like that. It felt kind of. They were skating the line of like, okay, here's a story, but we're not going to tell you certain things. So they were like, they left plot holes there. But with this, I can honestly say they really didn't leave any plot holes, YouTube. I really didn't. I mean, it was on point. The story was good. You saw Thanos's, kind of backstory along with it. They kind of explained his character. They made him, they changed him up a little bit. In the comic books, he's a little bit menacing. He's not necessarily, I mean, he's a bad guy, so he's evil, right? But he's menacing. There's a reason as far as what he does. In the comic book, he worships death. He worships Mistress Death, and he's in love with her. He wants her infatuations. He wants to hit that bony booty. I don't know why, but then again, I'm a black man who has a booty complex. But in this, I'm not going to say what his reasons are, but it's completely different than what they are in a comic book. And I didn't think I was going to like that. That's like, I have like 2 pet peeves with this movie. So it's like, it doesn't hit 10s across the board with me. I think it's a 10, but if I had to give it a score, but it's one of those things where it's like my comic book side is like, if they'd only had those 2 last things, it would have been perfect, right? And one of them I think is a half, and I'll get to that once, in other videos and things like that. But I don't want to explain what his motivations is in the comic books. Not in the comics, I'm sorry, in the movie, because they're completely different than what they are in a comic book. They kind of took a relatable approach. Instead of Thanos being like, oh, I'm this evil bad guy and I'm just evil for the sake of being evil, he's one of those guys where it's like, okay, you understand why he's doing what he's doing. And I get why they made that change, right? At first I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, right? Because I was watching the trailers that came out, and like, he didn't seem evil. And I even had somebody comment on one of my other videos saying the same thing, like, I don't like how they changed him. And I was like, yeah, I don't like it either, but it kind of, I mean, you kind of have to do that because Marvel already had a villain problem. Like, you never had a really great villain in the MCU, probably because they never had Magneto, you know what I'm saying? But it's one of those things where, how do you make a movie and make a villain, how do you get people to like your villain? You have to show their reasoning, their backstory, as far as, you either have to show their backstory so that it's relatable, meaning like Magneto, he probably has a little bit of both ways, so he's like the bisexual story character. Whereas normally with most villains and most probably most movies outside of comic book stuff too, you have to show either their story or their backstory to make them relatable. Meaning, let's say if this guy was like revenge movies, prime example, revenge movies, the one movie with The Rock in it, the one movie with what was his name? Nicolas Cage, where he had a revenge movie. I think Kevin Bacon had one. Hell, they even remade Death Wish with Bruce Willis. Those revenge movies, people love them because even though it's completely implausible, you wouldn't really do it, but it's one of those things that everybody understands. Like, if you get your family killed, you want to flip out and you want to kill the people that did it. It makes your villain relatable. So people usually root for the main character being that kind of villain. Prime example, The Punisher. Same exact thing, right? So you either have to do that or do flip the script and go Magneto, where he got it a little bit both ways. Like I said before, he has a little bit of backstory. You relate to him because if almost everybody, no matter what race you are, you've been discriminated against in some kind of way, so you understand the whole race angle through that and racism. But then you have to show their conviction. You know, that's the other way you can do it. How far are they willing to go to get their point across and to be in, let's say, their character? A prime example of what I'm talking about is in, what was it? X-Men Days of Future Past. When they had that plane scene where he was talking with Professor Xavier, and they were basically explaining their 2 points and arguments and how he stood up. And, you know, Magneto in the comic book has always had those driven conviction character moments, even when he fights like the Avengers or the X-Men, things like that. And that's another reason why people love his character. You know what I'm saying? You have to show one of those 2 things. Or if you want to pick a third, I guess you can be like the Joker and just be in really great stories that show how weird or how wacky you can be, whether that's funny or psychotic. So you have to do one of those 3 things when you're making a villain character, right? Because you can't make them the hero of the movie, because you got the heroes. They have to beat him. He's the bad guy, right? He has to do bad guy things. And in this one, like I said, they definitely changed up Thanos. They changed what his motivations was from the comic books, and this was pretty much his movie from beginning to end. One thing I did like about the movie, I don't feel like it's one of those things where it's like, I like the story, but I felt like they could have explained more here. I didn't feel that way about none of the scenes. Maybe certain casual people maybe felt that way because the movie was fast. I'm not gonna say it was fast paced like certain movies where it's like, oh, it's fast paced, I don't understand what's going on. That's not what I'm saying. The movie was like cut right to the point. Most movies, they when they come out, they have to set up the beginning, show you the characters, then get to whatever the point of the movie is. We have to stop this bad guy, or we have to go get this thing, or we got to do something. And then at the end of the movie, you have a conclusion to whatever the problem is, whatever the situation is. This movie, you already knew the characters. You already knew their backstory, so you didn't have to explain shit because they've already did that in all the other movies, right? What this movie was about was basically, how do we stop Thanos from getting all of the Infinity Gems, or the Infinity Stones as they're called in the movies? And that's what the whole point of it was. Where it was, as soon as some things happen, like the scene in the trailer, where you have Bruce Banner in Doctor Strange's house, right? They get there and they're like, oh man, we gotta stop Thanos, and this, that, and the other. And Tony Stark is like, how much time do we have? You know, because they're thinking like, all right, we got to prepare for this, right? So he's like, how much time do we have? And he's like, I don't know, man. It's like, we got, at least, like, and just before he like, gives them like a time frame, like, oh, we got like a day or two, a few days, or we got like a couple hours, right? As soon as he gets that line out, like, how much time do we have? That's that whole invasion scene in New York with the big ring. First 10 minutes of the movie. So they're like, oh, damn, it's already here. You thought you had time. No, you do not. And that's when you get introduced to all of that scene. But without getting too much in depth as far as the story, because like I said, we're gonna explain that in future parts to this. But they basically jump around because they don't have to explain the overarching story, or they don't have to explain a lot of things like that. This movie jumps right into the action, and it's not a bad thing. Like, it goes from action scene to action scene. And I'm not saying that, oh, it's a bad movie because all it is action scenes, but they explain things in a way, because since you already know who these characters are, if you watch their movies, you don't feel like, oh, I feel like I'm missing out with this character because of this. It amazed me that this movie had this many actors in it. Like, you had like 15 to 30 actors, major roles in this movie, and all of them at least some point had their screen time. Like, I don't feel like, oh, this movie's all about Iron Man and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, but nobody else got any play. No, everybody had their moment. Like, you had Cap had a couple moments, Bucky had a couple moments, the Guardians had their moments, Thor had some really great badass moments. Iron Man, he got, his bleeding edge armor buff was super effective against Thanos. And everybody got their own little things, right? And everybody got their moment to shine. And it's not just like, oh, it's a one-off moment, but you got to see those character moments like that. But then you also got to see how they interact with the other characters of the movie and things like that. Another thing that surprised me, I thought that that Iron Man and Doctor Strange will kind of sort of hit it off like they do in the comics, you know, by them being, let's say, opposites when it comes to characters, right? Because Tony Stark is science and Doctor Strange is magic. In the comic books, they always kind of bump heads when it comes to that. But at the same time, they're pretty much the same dickish character, or at least they used to be. Tony Stark's probably still there a little bit, but if you go read early Doctor Strange and go read early Iron Man, they're pretty much the same exact character. The same beats of the stories is what driven them. Like they were both egotistical dicks, got caught up in an accident, and then had to use their MacGuffin of their story, whether it be Iron Man armor or magic, to come out of it and be better people, and then do something further with that, you know, MacGuffin. So they're pretty much the same character, but with different story. So I thought they were gonna hit it off, but they didn't really. They kind of came to like an understanding, but I don't want to go too in depth with a lot of stuff. But like I said, I mean, the movie was damn near good. The music was on point. I like the fact that they kind of used the main Avengers theme for the trailers, and even in the movie you heard it a couple times. I was kind of hoping Thor had this one big moment. I don't want to say what it is, but I wanted them to play that theme from Ragnarok, that bridge scene song, the one from the trailer. But I guess that's a little bit too lighthearted for this movie. And speaking of that, you had jokes in this movie too. By going by the trailer, I thought that it was going to be one of those things where it was going to be a serious tone all throughout the movie. Definitely not the case. This movie wasn't like Thor Ragnarok and full of jokes. I guess it would say, if I had to equate it to something, it's kind of like Winter Soldier or like Black Panther, where it's like a serious movie, but there are some lighthearted moments in it that make you laugh and things like that. And the characters interacting with each other was like the greatest part of the movie, outside of the overall, you know, plot and theme and story. Because to me, that's the bigger picture. But everybody really probably went to go see this movie to see they want to see their favorite character interact with another character or something like that. You know, everybody got their favorites, right? And I'm just happy that mine is Iron Man, because, you know, he's the face of the MCU and gets most of the screen time. But movie was damn good. Like I said, if I had to give it a rating, it would be a 10. Is it perfect? No, it is not. To me, there were a couple things that I think they could have did a little bit better. I'll mention one major thing later in future videos, but there was one thing that they didn't show, and that's basically in the Guardians, when I think, was it the Power Stone that they gave to the people of Xandar. I thought at the beginning of this movie of Infinity War, they were going to show Thanos wrecking Xandar to get that Power Stone. In the movie, they did not show that. He just kind of showed up and he already had it. They didn't play a cutscene. They didn't hint to it. They just said one line like, "Oh, he already wrecked Xandar like 2 weeks ago." So I was kind of like, "Oh man, that feels kind of cheap." But I can understand why they cut that out, because this movie was already like 2.5 hours, you know. So I'm assuming when the Blu-ray comes out on this movie's gonna probably be like at least probably 3 or 4 hours. They probably have tons of cut content that they could have put in the movie that they probably had to cut down due to time restraints. So I mean, at the end, I don't like it, but if they'd have put that in there, they would have had to take out something else. And I'm glad of what they had as the final product, so I don't want them to take away anything from that. So I mean, if you had to cut that, so be it. But outside of that, the movie was great. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It was well worth my $120 something. And this movie, something else that surprised me. You had people standing up and clapping at the end of the movie. I've never seen that before in a movie theater. A rock show, yeah. A concert, yes. A play, yes. A movie, I've never seen people get up and clap, or let's say when certain things happen in the movie. Like at the end of the movie, something happens, and, you know, to all the major heroes, right? And when each moment was happening, whether it be one character or somebody else, the audience was gasping, gasping, because they were like worried about their character, doing something. And I was like, I've never seen, that. Like, I've heard people being like, okay, you get attached to characters, fine, it's whatever, right? But in a comic book movie, it's like I've never seen that happen. YouTube, I've never have. And it's like it just, when I think about it, I'm like, damn, these characters have been, people have been watching these characters for 10 years, right? Comic book fans like myself, we already had that feeling in the comic books, right? But for the average moviegoer who never experienced anything like this, it's just I'm thankful being a fan of the medium, and that Marvel was able to pull this off, because this is something that that's my one main problem with WB and how they're doing, or did rather, because I don't know if they're still going to do it, but how they're doing their superhero movies is by them not doing previous movies or building the foundations of their movieverse. There's no attachment to none of their characters, none whatsoever, right? And I guess that resonates with the audience, because with this movie, everybody was attached to at least somebody, and I'm pretty sure this movie is gonna probably have some kids crying when they leave the theater because of certain things that happen towards the end of the movie. And it just boggles my mind that Marvel was able to pull this off, because even when the credits came up, right, how like normally when you have an Avengers movie, the credits are rolling and it'll say things like the Avengers will appear in Avengers 2 Age of Ultron or something like that, right? In this, it didn't say that. So at the end of the movie, when something happens, it said Thanos will return in Avengers 4. So I was like, damn. But this movie ended exactly the way I hoped it ended. I know I mentioned in like 2 or 3 other videos where I was like, they need to end the movie like this and have people shook in their seat. And they did. They did exactly that, and I'm so happy for it. I've already heard that this movie, I think over the weekend, it made like $600 million overseas, and then I think it made like 300 or 200 something million domestically so far, and it already beat out Justice League's entire I mean, granted, it's not a whole lot, but it already beat out Justice League's entire run in like 4 days. And it already has like the top grossing domestic movie I think of all time or something like that. So this movie, like I did before it came out, right? I remember saying in the previous video that I think this movie will be good. I mean, I know it's gonna be good, but I don't think it's gonna do those Black Panther numbers, right? That's exactly what I said, because Black Panther had such a strong movement. But by this being in the theater, right, and this movie was so big, like mind you, my theater that I go to, right, it's not a small theater, it's not like a super large theater either, but it's like next to a mall. It's a part of a mall, and it's an IMAX type theater, so you have like 2 IMAX screens and a bunch of other regular movie screens and things like that, right? When this movie came out, when I was buying tickets for it, everything was Infinity War. All of their screenings. They didn't do other movies at the same time as they were doing this. No, like their whole entire theater was just Marvel's Infinity War the whole weekend, because they probably know that millions of people were going to probably go see this movie. And I'm assuming my theater is not the only one that did that. So that's probably why it's making a whole lot more money. It's not going to be like how Black Panther was when Black Panther came out. They had a couple screens, or maybe like 3 or 4 screens, and then they still were playing everything else in the background on the other showings and stuff like that. But this movie, like I said, I didn't think this movie was gonna make that Black Panther money, because the movement was so strong with Black Panther. But after seeing it and seeing how the audiences gelled with the movie and how they liked it and how they are currently responding to all of the hype in the movie, and just the reactions and stuff when certain things were happening to certain characters, I don't know, this might be the biggest movie they ever made, and this may even eclipse Black Panther as far as money over time. because I don't know how much money, you know, totally it made this weekend, but it's been like 4 days and it's probably made like, I would guess, I mean, I don't know, have an exact number, but probably in the, maybe the upper millions, maybe like just under $1 billion, maybe like 600, 700 million, something like that. So you know it's going to hit $1 billion by the end of like 3 or 4 months. So that's going to definitely happen. So who knows how much it's going to climb? I mean, I think this movie's going to probably sell a whole lot until probably Deadpool 2 comes out. And even then, you know, it may still sell. Who knows? Marvel has that lineage. Like with Black Panther, you know, when everything else was coming out, Black Panther was just staying at #1. I think this is definitely going to do that too. But I also know Deadpool 2 is like super popular. So that's going to probably hit it a little bit once that comes out. But until then, I mean, it's going to be all Infinity War all the time. But anyways, guys, like I said, this is going to be a multi-part series of videos that I'm going to do, talking about all of Infinity War. And I'm hopeful that or hopefully I should say, let me talk like I actually have some sense. Hopefully I didn't give away any spoilers in, you know, in this part, because this is the part where I wanted to be spoiler free. I just wanted to give my impressions on it. I swear to God, I meant for this to be like 10 minutes, but now we're pushing like 26 minutes and 24 seconds. But I'm just really pumped about the movie, and I didn't want to make this like right after I seen it. I wanted to let my thoughts kind of digest, and I'm gonna go back and watch it 2 or 3 times. But like I said, I don't know how long this series is gonna be. I may do it per character and what I think of their character, or what about those characters in the story in the movie. I may do it per scene, you know. I'm gonna definitely do videos talking about the different things like the story, the plot, what Thanos was trying to do, things like that. But I know I'm gonna get, like I said, I'm gonna get Black Porn Star deep with it. I'm gonna probably make maybe 6 to 7 to 8 videos, and they're each gonna probably be this long, if not longer, because this is just the intro video. So each video may be like 45 minutes to an hour long. But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up, and I didn't want to throw all of that in just this 1-2 hour long video, because I just wanted to break it up for you guys, because who got the time for that, you know? So my name is Denonu, the man with the biggest and the most blackest privilege on YouTube, and be on the lookout for the next part. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.